It is 3 in the morning. The world outside is completely still. No wind, no traffic, no sound except the quiet rhythm of a sleeping house. Inside, a family rests. A mother and father in their bedroom, 2 young children down the hall, and a cat curled at the foot of the bed, still as a shadow. But that night, something was different. The cat opened its eyes. It did not stretch. It did not yawn. It simply raised its head and stared into the darkness of the room with an intensity that no one was awake to see. Something was wrong. And what this cat did in the next few minutes would change everything. The Henderson family lived in a modest 2-story home on the edge of a quiet suburb in rural Ohio. It was the kind of neighborhood where people knew each other's names, where children rode bicycles in the street, and where evenings ended with the sound of the front door closing softly behind the last person in. David and Sarah Henderson had been married for 11 years. Their daughter Lily was 8 years old. Their son Marcus had just turned 5. By any measure, theirs was an ordinary and happy life. And then there was Ember. Ember was a 6-year-old orange tabby cat with a broad face and amber eyes that caught the light in an almost unnerving way. David had found her as a kitten on the side of a highway, sitting in the rain next to an overturned box. He had pulled over without thinking, wrapped her in his jacket, and driven her home. Sarah had protested, just briefly. By the end of the week, Ember had claimed the best spot on the sofa and refused to give it up. For 6 years, Ember had been a constant presence in that house. She greeted the children when they came home from school. She slept at the foot of David and Sarah's bed every single night without exception. She was ordinary in almost every way, until that night. The strange behavior. It was 11 minutes past 3 in the morning when Ember moved. She slid off the bed silently, landed on the floor without a sound, and crossed to the bedroom door. Then she began to scratch. Not the lazy, distracted scratching of a cat that wants to be let outside. This was frantic, urgent, relentless. Sarah stirred first. She opened her eyes, registered the sound, and assumed Ember simply wanted water. She closed her eyes again. Ember did not stop. The scratching grew louder. Then Ember began to meow, and this was not the soft, conversational sound she made on ordinary mornings. This was something sharper, something that did not belong to the quiet of that hour. David sat up. In 6 years, he had never heard Ember make this sound. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and crossed to the door, intending to let her out. But when he opened it, Ember did not leave. Instead, she turned and ran 3 steps down the hallway, then stopped and looked back at him. He stepped back toward the bed. She ran back, jumped up, and pawed at his arm. Sarah was fully awake now, watching from the bed. She whispered to David that something was wrong with the cat, that maybe Ember was sick, that they should call the vet in the morning. Neither of them understood what the cat was trying to do. Not yet. The discovery. It was David who noticed it first. He had stepped into the hallway to follow Ember, more out of concern for her than anything else, when something stopped him. A smell. It was faint, barely there. The kind of smell that registers in the back of the mind before the conscious brain can name it. Something acrid, something that did not belong. He stood still in the hallway and breathed in slowly. Smoke. His body reacted before his mind finished the thought. He turned and looked toward the staircase. At the bottom of the stairs, barely visible in the darkness, a thin ribbon of gray curled upward from beneath the door to the utility room. His heart stopped for 1 full second. The utility room sat directly below the children's bedrooms. He later told investigators that what happened inside him in that moment was not panic. It was the opposite, a cold, absolute clarity. A single thought that overrode everything else. Get them out. The escape. He was already moving as he called Sarah's name. She heard it in his voice and was out of bed before he reached the doorway. He told her to take Lily. He went for Marcus. Marcus was deeply asleep, the way only small children sleep, completely unreachable. David lifted him with both arms and held him against his chest and walked as fast as he could without running, because he did not want to frighten the boy and because he did not yet know how much time they had. Sarah had Lily in her arms. The girl was confused and half asleep, asking questions that nobody answered. They moved down the hallway toward the front staircase, away from the utility room. David could smell it more strongly now, and faintly, beneath the smell, he heard something he would never forget. A low crackling, dry and rhythmic and growing. They reached the front door. David threw it open. Cold air hit them all at once. He pushed Sarah and the children through, then turned. Ember was right behind him. He grabbed her as he stepped outside, tucking her under one arm, and pulled the door shut. They crossed the front yard in bare feet on cold grass and stopped at the edge of the driveway. Sarah was already calling the emergency number. The children were crying now, finally understanding that something was very wrong. David stood and looked back at the house. Through the small side window of the utility room, he could see it. Orange light moving behind the glass. The fire spreads. The fire had started in the electrical panel inside the utility room. A fault in the wiring, investigators would later conclude, had been smoldering inside the wall cavity for over an hour before it finally broke through. By the time the first fire engine turned onto the street, the utility room was fully alight, and the fire had begun moving through the wall into the kitchen. The family stood on the grass and watched. Marcus had stopped crying and was pressed against his father's side with his eyes wide open. Lily held her mother's hand and did not speak. Sarah had one arm around her daughter and was watching the window she had looked out of every morning for 9 years. Within 4 minutes of the first engine arriving, 2 more followed. Firefighters worked through the night. The utility room was destroyed. The kitchen sustained severe damage. Smoke had penetrated both upper bedrooms. The lead fire investigator on the scene walked the perimeter of the house in the early hours of the morning and then crossed the yard to where the family was standing wrapped in emergency blankets. He looked at them for a moment before he spoke. He told them that the fire had been burning inside the wall for considerably longer than most people would assume before noticing the smell. He told them that the utility room was directly below the children's rooms. He told them that at the rate the fire was moving, they had, in his estimation, approximately 12 additional minutes before the ceiling of that room would have been compromised. 12 minutes. The children had been asleep 6 feet above it. The aftermath. In the days that followed, the Henderson family stayed with Sarah's sister 3 miles away. The children slept in a spare room. David sat at the kitchen table most mornings and said very little. Ember sat on his lap. When a local journalist asked David what he wanted people to understand about what had happened, he was quiet for a long moment before he answered. He said that people always talk about animals as if they are simple, as if they operate only on instinct and appetite. But he had seen the look in Ember's eyes that night. He had seen the way she came back for him, the way she refused to stop until he followed. He said that was not instinct. That was something else entirely. The fire investigator had already said as much in his own way. When a colleague at the station asked him about the cat, he did not hesitate. He said that animal had saved 4 lives. That was his professional assessment, and he would stand behind it. A photograph taken that night by a neighbor of the family standing in the glow of the fire trucks with the cat visible in David's arms was shared widely online in the weeks that followed. People who did not know the Henderson family found themselves moved by it in ways they could not fully explain. Sarah was asked in one interview whether she had ever doubted it, whether she thought perhaps it was coincidence. She looked at the interviewer and said that she had held her daughter in her arms outside that house and watched the window above the utility room turn orange. There was no doubt, she said. There was only gratitude. Cats have lived alongside human beings for nearly 10,000 years. In ancient Egypt, they were considered sacred. In medieval Europe, they were feared and misunderstood. In our time, they are companions, fixtures of our homes, quiet presences that share our mornings and our nights. And yet, for all that history, for all the centuries of living side by side, there are still things we do not fully understand about them. We do not fully understand what they perceive that we cannot. We do not fully understand the depth of the bond that forms between them and the people they choose to live with. We do not fully understand what moves through the mind of an animal that wakes in the darkness, senses something that the sleeping humans around it cannot yet detect, and refuses to rest until the people it loves are safe. What we know is this. On a cold night in Ohio, in a house where everyone was asleep, a 6-year-old orange tabby cat woke up. She scratched at a door until someone opened it. She refused to be ignored. She went back again and again until she was followed. Because of that, a mother and a father walked out of a burning house with their children in their arms. Because of Ember. There is a lesson in that, perhaps more than one. Sometimes the most extraordinary acts of courage come from the smallest and quietest places. Sometimes a hero does not arrive with fanfare or strength. Sometimes a hero weighs 8 pounds and has amber eyes and has been sleeping at the foot of your bed for 6 years, waiting, without knowing it, for the one moment when everything would matter. That night, Ember was ready, and because she was, so was everyone else.